Did you do any shooting while you were in the U.S.? Did you go to any gun ranges or anything
No,
like that?
no, not at all. No, because it was SBM Offshore is it's a gas and oil organisation, so we really only had 4 days in country.
Mm.
So it was all about and it really it was trying to be realistic. So they were on the seventh floor of a building. Now a lot of the locals they said, listen, we need ballistic doors, blah blah blah. Yeah, fantastic. What a great idea. However, let's be realistic here. Having ballistic doors is not the sensible solution. When you're 7 floors up in a building, there's a good chance that other people are going to be attacked before you. So it was all about how to try and escape initially, but also finding places that you can actually lock down and be safe in. And some of the best places to hide in an office are the toilets because they're inward opening doors, so you can chock them. They don't have windows for obvious reasons. So we made that a focal point, really, that all your toilets, just stick a little yellow sticker in the top corner so that in your blind panic, when somebody's shooting, because nobody knows how they're going to react to gunfire until they've actually been shot at. So, trying to teach individuals, right, only you three people are going to learn this. They could be the ones that get shot initially or panic when somebody actually shoots at them. So our training is really to everybody from the cleaner to the CEO of the company. Everybody needs to understand what their options are. And really, because, someone who you wouldn't think, may become the leader of that situation, purely because back in the day they might have been shot at, so they understand what it's actually like to be shot at. So our teaching is slightly different and off a norm, if that makes, and it does annoy the police over here, because like I say, all the training for them is geared around a police response. But call me old-fashioned, these people that burst into somewhere and start shooting people. Normally it's finished way before the police turn up, so we need to be a bit more self-sufficient and reliant, to get the job done, to actually survive it. And I tell you, the incident that I always use as a bit of a as a sort of guideline is the one over in Christchurch in New Zealand, when the Australian guy walked into the mosque. And started killing everyone, because sadly, all the lessons learned on that was how not to react, and nobody reacted. Nobody, took the lead to try and take this individual on, again, what we're trying to say is, 20 people come into an office and you've only got one exit. If you do nothing, that's 20 people going to be killed. It takes one person to grow a set of kahunas, go for it, that hopefully will encourage other people. Now, if you get 5 people shot dead, but you've managed to overpower the shooter, then that's a bit of a bummer for the 5 that have been killed, obviously. But we'll make sure that they get a good send off.
Yeah.
But for the other 15, they've managed to survive, and it's trying to get that mentality across to a very woke and bit of a potty-like civilian mentality.
I'd much rather die fighting than die cowering behind a desk, just waiting for the next one shot, Yeah, we had a similar situation, I think is probably world famous, that Uvalde school shooting, where they had all the police that were there, but none of them were going into the room to stop this guy as he's actively shooting people. And then eventually one of the BORTAC, the Border Patrol's, basically they're like special operations guys, a BORTAC guy showed up and was like, what are we doing? Like, he's in that room? Okay. And he went in first and finally went in and took the dude out. He took a round. He almost, I think his hat got shot, or maybe he took a grazing wound in the face or something like that. But they killed the shooter. But it was like, why is there literally like 100 officers here just waiting? Like, what are you waiting for? The dude is killing kids. Like, fucking get in there.
If I remember right, there's a lot of the parents were trying to get in there as well, wasn't it, to save the kids and you know, and
and one of the police officers' wife was a teacher, and she texted him and said she had been shot, and he was trying to go in, and they stopped him. They wouldn't let him, and I'm like, man, that's crazy. Like, I can't imagine.
People didn't come out of that very well at all, did they? You know, you can imagine. You know, if you've got a weapon, you know, over here we don't have weapons, so if you're going to take someone out, you know, instantly you're looking for something nice and heavy to take them out. You know, but if you've got a pistol, especially over in the States, then you're, you know, that's a plus side of it. You just go for it, like, you know. And yeah, you know as well as I do. You know, if you rush someone, you know, there's a good chance they're going to miss you, especially, you know, 30 meters plus. They ain't going to be hitting you. You know, they're going to be all over the place.
Hey, he's an untrained teenager. Untrained teenager. He's as nervous as you are. Yeah, and if you're a police officer, you have way more training than he does, so you're coming in with the advantage. He may have a rifle, and he may have the advantage of being in a room where you may not know exactly where he's at, but he is probably more nervous than he's ever been, and this is like the first time he's ever been in a situation like this. You know, like I said, no training or anything. Like, I think people forget how, like, humans react. Like, in real life, this kid is just a kid. You know, he's a kid with a rifle doing something evil, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's skilled at what he's doing. That's why he went for an elementary school, because no one would fight back. As soon as resistance is put up, he's going to get taken out. You know, it's like, I just can't imagine being a police officer that stands outside of a room while kids are getting shot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and bear in mind, you've got to live with yourself for the rest of your life, really. You know, you got to, you know, when you're shaving in the morning, look at yourself and think, actually, you know, I could have done a lot more, like, you know, and quite honestly. So, but, you know, over here, it's just trying to change that mentality. You know, we are a bit soft, and we're getting softer by the day. And because you can imagine that shooting happening in the 70s, the mentality of the police is slightly different. And there's a good chance that the police would have just gone straight in there, like, you know. And I tell you what, I was trying to mention a story. So I did undercover work in Northern Ireland in the military, and at the end of every what they do is they send 4 SAS guys to join this doing the surveillance thing, because it's a really good skill to have. But you've still got the SAS mentality, which means that you're not the best of surveillance people, because you tend to be very Robocop-ish, you know, getting the man. So, you know, you stand out a wee bit. And we understand that. But at the end of when you first go to Belfast, you have to do a ground orientation. So you have to walk into all the really bad areas, because you've got to know the bad areas to avoid them, if that makes sense. So your first month is quite dodgy. You're going to get blown. You know, someone's going to understand that you're not a normal local person, if that makes sense. So you tend to grow your hair really long. You wear sort of scruffy clothes, and then at the end of that month, you completely change your appearance and burn all your clothing and that deters you from trying to wear it again, because if you get spotted in one area and they recognize your t-shirt, for instance, and you're tempted to wear it again, they might actually just recognize the t-shirt and not the face, and it still puts you at risk, if that makes sense. But at the end of that sort of training thing, that orientation, we then ran a proper surveillance serial in quite hard areas. But unbeknown to me and the rest of the 4 new people, they ran an exercise, and we thought it was real. And what it was when you're hearing on the radio, one of the guys actually got snatched, and it came up on the radio that a guy had been dragged out of his car. So one of our people had been dragged out and taken into a house. Now, when you're hearing that on the radio, your emotions and your adrenaline changes. You know, automatically you go at 100 miles an hour. And I got to the site where supposedly this guy had been taken into, and there was a guy there quite a senior guy, really. Unbeknown to me, he was sort of part of it. But he said, yeah, Mick. So I got there and he said, yeah, Mick, he's in that house there. So without thinking, I grabbed a shotgun to take the hinges off, grabbed my car pistol. So I now had 2 pistols. My car pistol's got a 20-round mag on it, quite an extended mag on it. So that gave me enough ammunition for what I wanted to do. And then I was sprinting over to the door, and it was in a place called the Ardoyne. Now, the Ardoyne is a very staunch Catholic hardcore estate. So a bit of a bizarre place, really, to do an exercise, but again, we didn't know it was an exercise. So I was running to the door to take the hinges off, to just go for it, because normally the planning is you establish where the house is, control it, make sure nobody gets in and out. And then we've got an SAS team in Belfast, so my ilk people, and they do the hostage rescue. But being SAS, I just thought, I don't need that. Let's go for it, So I'm running over there, shotgun, pistol. Oh, let's go for it. Shouting to the guy, on me, only needs 2 of us, for 6 or 7 in there. So what, we're good to go, And as I shouted over to him, he looked at me in horror, and just shouted, "Mick, what the hell?" And I was like, "That, why are you not behind me?" Mm-hmm. And then he shouted, "Mick, it's an exercise." And I tell you what, I was flipping fuming, because all of a sudden your emotions and everything else is changing, because you're hearing something on the radio, and it's one of our guys has been snatched by the IRA, so call me old-fashioned. Now every SAS guy would have done exactly the same as what I've done. That they wouldn't have been sat outside waiting, while people are inside. Yeah. Torturing one of your own people. You'd be flipping through that door.
I mean, Christian Craighead, right? What Christian Craighead kind of proved that point, and he showed that one person with initiative can really change a situation. Was this before? Was this before or after those dudes got pulled out of that car and killed in Ireland?
So that happened just before I deployed. If that makes sense. So all our training totally changed. So if you put yourself in that position, for instance, and bear in mind these young lads should never have been in that area. They weren't special forces. They were just signals lads, and they really just got caught up in a bad situation, and everything really went against them. If that makes sense, because the army knew that they weren't there. They shouldn't have been there. So there was no record of military being there. They actually thought it was an internal dispute, or maybe a Protestant and Catholic issue. So the helicopter just, stayed away from it, and the police never came in, and the army never came in. It was, let them deal with it. And it was only afterwards when they realised that they're actually military, wrong place at the wrong time. But the impact that had then on the training was quite simple. So if you're in a situation like that and you're surrounded by bad people, you just pull your pistol out and you draw a line on the floor, and anyone steps over that, you just and you tend to go for the more aggressive individual. Put the aggressive individual away first, and then you keep banging them down until you can escape. Because unfortunately, what that showed is what they're willing to do to military people if you get captured. So in a sort of bizarre way, it actually improved our training. Yeah. Never to get caught, if that makes sense. So, yeah. and a lot of the stuff we do is quite ballsy. It has to be to get the intelligence that you get. Bear in mind that you're in the IRA's backyard. You're operating literally in their back gardens. So some of the stuff you do is actually crazy, but you have to do it. It's the only way really of doing it. Now I look worse. My hair was longer than what it is now. I had a big gold earring. a bit, I looked like a bit of a pirate, I suppose, and a bit of a drug runner, but I had, cut off my jeans, all holes in it. And it's funny because people would look at you a bit strange, because you were a new face on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I deliberately spoke English with an English accent, because a lot of guys try to put on an Irish accent. Now, call me old-fashioned, but if you put on a bit of a phony Belfast accent or Irish accent, you speak to a local Belfast, they're going to see through you straight away.
Yeah.
And you're going to confirm their suspicions. So I went the other way. I just refused to speak, and I just spoke as I am now, and yeah, what are you looking at, and the other thing is, as well, is we never used to shy away. So if people are sort of 3 or 4 of them sort of coming towards you, we call them dickers. So, people that are keeping an eye out for, what other people are doing. So if they're going to confront you, rather than, trying to avoid the situation and scurrying away, because if you do that, all you're doing is you're the suspicions of these people that you are not who you think, so you're a bit suspicious. But if you actually confront these people, walk over and say, yeah, what are you looking at? And, give them a bit of grief. Bear in mind, you've got a flipping pistol in your trousers stashed away. And if it all goes pear-shaped, you can just pull that out. So, that's your get out of jail card, if that makes sense. So it's actually quite a surreal environment to operate in. And unfortunately, because we don't have Northern Ireland anymore, the standard of covert surveillance is slightly different. Because operating in Belfast, believe you me, your third-party awareness needs to be absolutely sky high, because you don't know who's actually watching what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So you might be watching the individual, but you've got other people watching what you're doing. So you've got your third-party awareness has to be absolutely spot on. And the other thing really is you've got to be really, really honest. So when you come in and after having done a surveillance serial, when you come in, you all have to sit there and do a debrief, and you've got to be 100% honest. And if you feel that somebody was taking notice of you, and you may have got blown, as we call it, you have to own up to it. You have to put your hand up and say, yeah, I think, because if you don't, another person might go to that same location that you were hanging about, and be ready for them. It might be an ambush or whatever. So I ended up in the helicopter more times than, I used to get blown every 2 minutes, purely because I was quite aggressive, I suppose. But I ended up in the helicopter quite a lot. And the reason being is we've always got a helicopter up in Belfast. So we use the helicopter for doing surveillance with the cameras and stuff like that. And it just takes the pressure really off the car teams and the people walking. But unfortunately, the people in the helicopter are generally the people that have just been blown. So, yeah, I became pretty good doing helicopter surveillance, unfortunately.
That's such an interesting dynamic you guys have with Ireland. And I mean, I know it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, the animosity between England and Ireland and Protestants and Catholics and, what is it, the Orange? No, is that Dutch? I don't remember. I read some about it, but it's such a weird dynamic where you guys have these military deployments within your own country, basically. It's not your country. I don't know how you guys define that. I know it's all UK, so and one of your own states. That'd be like us deploying our military to Chicago to run surveillance, and I don't know how the people would react to that. It's Is that still? I mean, is it as bad as the IRA? Is that still really an issue, or is that more of they're more bark than bite nowadays?
Yeah, it's funny. So after the ceasefire and everything else kicked in, the peace walls. So if you're in Belfast and you're between a Catholic and a Protestant area, you've got quite a large fence line. They call it a divide. That's still there. Believe you me, the Protestants and the Catholics, there's still animosity there. Hopefully it won't go back, but it only takes an incident for that to spark off again, if that makes sense. Because these two communities they don't get on at all.
It's crazy. Hundreds of years later, they still have issues with each other. Just like let live, live and let live kind of deal.
Yeah, when I first deployed to Northern Ireland as a normal Green Army, normal army, it was in South Armagh. They called it Bandit Country, and we did a 4-month tour down there. And now I went there with the impression that the Catholics were the bad people, and the Protestant were the good people. And that was, that's generally the sort of mindset people go in. So when you're stopping cars on a Sunday, for the fun of because the Catholics have got their suits on and they're heading to church, and you decide that you want to search a car and strip it, just to annoy the people. That actually had quite a profound effect on me, because I did a bit of studying afterwards, and then realised actually about 98% of the Catholic population in Northern Ireland are peaceful people and good people. And it's only that little small minority of bad guys. So when I went again doing the undercover stuff, I was more switched onto it, if that makes sense. And a lot of our work, although it was against SERE or INLA and other sort of offshoots of the IRA, the Protestants were pretty active, to be quite frank. And being British Army, you tend not to, you don't take sides. Same as when we're in Bosnia. If you was a Muslim, a Serb or a Croat and you were a bad person, you were going to get dealt with by the British Army, regardless of who you were. Same in Northern Ireland. If you're a bad guy intent on harming someone, Catholic, Protestant or whoever, you're going to get taken on by the British Army. And unfortunately, the IRA, I don't think, actually believed that. They actually thought that the British Army were there just to take on the IRA. The reason why the SAS specifically targeted the IRA was because the IRA were more active, and they were planning more jobs. But unfortunately for the IRA, they had a lot of people that used to tell stories.
Yeah, I mean, as an American, I thought that was the main issue, was the IRA. I never even. So what would be the Protestant version of the IRA? Like, what's the group of Protestants that's the kind of moving the animosity? Go ahead.
Yeah, you got the Ulster Freedom Fighters, the Ulster Volunteer Force, anything with a red hand is. But literally, you can walk around any part of Belfast, blindfolded. As soon as you take the blindfold off, you know exactly what area you're going to be in, because all the Protestant areas, Shankill, for instance, staunch Protestant, and everything is red, white, and blue. The curbstones, red, white, and Union Jacks. The Ulstermen, the Northern Irish Protestant, are more British than the British. Bizarrely, they're really they still sing the British anthem. Scotland don't, Wales don't, and England still sing the national anthem, and Northern Irish, they sing it with a fervour, if that makes sense. And it's the same as when you go into a Catholic area. You're in a Catholic area purely because it's now red, green, and orange. The tricolour, if that makes sense. But it's quite a surreal. But I loved it. I absolutely loved I love the people. They are real, genuine, good people. And Belfast, bizarrely, a few years ago, I went and decided when I hit 60, typical military. I wanted to do something different. So I decided to run up all the highest peaks in UK and Ireland. So started in Wales first, because that's the nearest one to where I live. Then went up to England, Scotland, Ben Nevis. Got the ferry over to Belfast to do the one in Northern Ireland, which is actually the shortest one. And then I drove over to the Republic. And it's the first time I'd been to the Republic. Well, legally anyway. We've been across the border in the military. So it's the first time and I was just shocked really how nice and peaceful and friendly the people were. Bear in mind that I was driving a car with English plates on, and drove and their highest peak is down in the southwest part of the country. Beautiful, absolutely stunning part of the country down there. And the place I stayed in, the pubs you go in, automatically people are coming up and talking, and such friendly people. And I would recommend Belfast to anybody because it's one of the most friendliest cities you can actually go. Like city centre. If you ever do a Belfast trip, always stay in the Europa Hotel. Why? Because it's the most bombed hotel in the world in its day. And then you've got a place called the Crown Bar, which is a throwback really to the early part of the century. Going in there, all wooden teak and little booths and brass, and it's just fantastic. Friendly people. But unfortunately, in our time, there was bad people operating over there, and and there's bad people. Unfortunately, you've got to deal with these people before they can actually kill other people.
Yeah, it makes a bad name for everybody, right? I mean, like we were talking at the beginning about immigration and stuff. A lot of these immigrants they're good people looking for better lives and stuff. And then there's that group of them that are extremists that are coming over to commit crimes and stuff. There was a video that just went viral here a couple days ago. I posted it on my Instagram, Former Action News, and it shows some Venezuelan immigrants basically taking over an apartment building. They've stopped the property managers from coming on the property, and they're like this is what I've read. I could be a little wrong on the facts, but they're having like the people pay them, and and you see them on video carrying weapons around this apartment complex in Colorado, and it's like, what the fuck is that? Like how? And that is a poor reflection on any Venezuelan immigrant, because now it is well known that there are Venezuelan gangs operating in the United States, and it's well known as well, especially in the police communities, that they've told their gangs to target police officers if they do attacks. And because of that, now you have to almost look at any Venezuelan with suspicious eyes, and it's just unfortunate because not everyone deserves that kind of scrutiny and stuff like that. And it just makes things worse. And it's really the government's fault for allowing it to get to that level, to allow those kind of elements to come in and do those things and kind of work without anyone really stopping them. And I know they say they're working on taking care of that issue and everything like that, but yeah, it's just so crazy. I do want to back up because we kind of jumped ahead here, talking about your time in the SAS and everything like that. When you first came in, I heard you on a different podcast. You said that you initially signed up for the Army when you were 16. How does that, for junior paratroopers or something like that?
Yeah, so in them days, so 1975, a lot of the military regiments had their own junior battalion, I suppose, and the parachute regiment had the junior parachute regiment. So you could join up at 16 years of age. And you're not parachuting. It's juniors, so it's a bit more of a glorified cadets, if that makes sense. And you learn how to march, you learn how to shoot, and everything else. And for me, there was at the same time when I first joined, there was a thing called the gymnastic platoon, and someone suggested, because I was into fitness and stuff like that, they suggested join it because they toured the country. So it was a good way, really, of the parachute regiment sort of selling their, come and join the parachute regiment, because it was not only was it a gymnastic sort of show, but you were recruiting, really trying to recruit people to join the, so it was, and it was a 6 month stint, really. And then at 17, when you hit 17, you then go into recruit training, proper recruit training. But because you've done a year as juniors, you sort of join. So it's a 26 week course, and we joined at about week 5 because you've done all the all the bullshit, all the basic marching and all that, like you've done that for the last year. So you then join at week 5, and then you crack on, really. And unfortunately for me, so week 12 is P Company, which is a physical test that you have to do to pass, to then go on, and that's when you pass P Company that you then get issued your beret, your Marine beret, and then about 4 weeks later, we were getting ready to go to and they call it Advanced Wales, which is a 3-week stint down in Wales, ready to do advanced tactics, ambushes and all that sort of thing. So just before we went, really, we decided to go for a 10-mile run, as you do, and we were out in, and it was a lot of tank burns, so very hilly, and the instructors decided to, have a bit of fun, so decided to put us all on this 8-foot tank burn, and we all had to jump off and do what we perceived as being a para roll. Bear in mind, you're not para trained until the very end of your training,
Mm-hmm.
So as I jumped off, I snapped my ankle quite badly, and so they manipulated it into place. Stayed in hospital for the 2 weeks while it knitted. They then x-rayed it, and then they told me that it hadn't knitted properly, so they had to pin it. So they pinned the ankle. About a year later, having gone through, the rehabilitation and all that sort of thing, and just getting back running and getting the ankle going, and one of the medical officers decided that it would be unwise for me to be able to parachute. So obviously a young lad, they're being a bit too cautious, I suppose. So they said, listen, you can't parachute, so here's your options. And the options were go off and join normal infantry regiments. And because I was indoctrinated, really, parachute regiment or nothing,
Mm-hmm.
I made the biggest mistake of my life, really, and left the army. And then 6 months later, realised what a dickhead choice that was, and then rejoined, basically. So because it was an army recruiting centre, they said, listen, you've got a fantastic report from the parachute regiment. Obviously, there's a big stamp on there saying you can't parachute. Have you thought about being a commando, army commando? So the choices were join the Royal Artillery, because an organisation called 29 Commando, who are the artillery support ready for the Royal Marines,
Mm-hmm.
or 59 Commando, so engineers doing the same support role for the Royal Marines. So I decided to join the artillery. So
were you part of 148 battery then?
No, I was 7 battery up in same regiment, 29 Commando, but I was Arbroath, Scotland. So we did the Arctic warfare role with 4-5 Commando, and I was quite lucky because I have never been on the guns in my life. I've never actually I did the basic gunnery course, but I was lucky enough to get sort of pushed up to the OPs, forward observation post.
That's the spot.
Or the food part. Yeah, so quite lucky. So when the Falklands came about, and bear in mind that my pin in my ankle should have come out after 18 months. And being a young dickhead, I totally forgot about the pin.
Uh-huh.
So left it in basically, and just forgot about it. And then April 1982, the Falklands sort of kicked off.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 months before that, I was on a run, and my ankle was quite painful. So the Marines, the medical centre, x-rayed it and said, "Oh, you got a pin in your ankle." And I went, "Oh, yeah." So when did you get that put in? And I told him, it was 5 years before or whatever. Or 6 years, I think. So much to their disgust, they said, "Listen, you need to go there and try and get this taken out." So they sent me down to London, just outside London. tried to get the pin out, couldn't get it out. Couldn't get it out. So all they did was they just, buried it deeper, I suppose. Stitched me up, but the wound was directly over the top of the old wound. So the knitting of the skin was quite thin. So it hadn't fully recovered, I suppose. So then we got the Falklands kicked off, and we were attached to 4-5 Commando. So we sailed all the way down there, and then when we got to Ascension Island, we then cross-decked onto a vessel with 4-5 Commando, who we were going to go ashore with, and then went ashore basically, and because you've got the 4-men artillery foo party, and then on the landing crafts, we ended up at the very front. So you got all the Marines behind you thinking, yeah, they're going to get shot first. But there's nothing you could really do about it because it's such a tight, and you just took it and, just get it And we also carried, to get the mortars ashore, everybody carried a mortar or 2 mortar bombs. So you had about £100 worth of kit in your burg and your weapon, and, these 2 mortar bombs. And then so when the ramp went down, thankfully, it was an unopposed landing, and we managed to drop all the mortar bombs. And then it was a matter of just heading to the high ground, really, and then establish a beachhead, because that was the plan, is to get everybody ashore initially, set up a beachhead, and then after it was all established, you then did the breakout, if that makes sense, and that was So in the meantime, you've got Argentinian aircraft sort of wanging over your head. You've got British warships, frigate specifically, that got bombed directly in front of us. So that was a sad sight, seeing a Navy frigate sort of break its back and sink.
That would be so crazy to see.
Well, unfortunately, there was an unexploded bomb on there. It's called the Antelope, HMS Antelope. But there was an unexploded bomb in there, and a very brave individual from the Royal Engineers went on board and tried to defuse it, and the thing went off, unfortunately. But that explosion broke the back of the vessel. So it was, a bit of a sad sight, dug into your position, and just watching the vessel sink, but it brought it all home. We were now in a conflict, and it was one of them. It was an old-fashioned conflict. It's bayonets, map, compass, and away you go. It wasn't all the technology that you get nowadays. And even some of the waterproof jackets that we had were, but they weren't waterproof at all. You got soaking wet.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, so my ankle. So because it was peak bog, I decided to wear high leg boots that we used to use in Northern Ireland boots. So as soon as you look at them, they get wet, basically. So because my ankle was soaking wet, and the peak bog with the dirt and everything else, when we did so we were part of the unit that actually walked all the way over to, they call it the Yomp, did the Yomp across there with all your kit on, basically. So we got to a place called Mount Kent. I know SAS were there having a major battle. Our artillery guns got flown on to Mount Kent while the SAS were still in battle, sorting out everything else. Quite bizarre, really. And it's funny because, we're yomping along, and our guns who were supporting us flying overhead in front of us, anyway, bizarre. So we got to Mount Kent, really, and then we had about a 5-day period, really, where we had to wait for all the other units from the QE2, and that brought down 5 Corps, they call it, the Welsh Guards, the Gurkhas, the Scotch Guards, all that lot. So it was quite a frustrating time. But what we were doing, we decided to adjust the 2-9 Commando guns onto 2 Sisters. So we adjusted it. And at the end of it, because we called a 5-mission regiment, so, all 3 batteries were all firing on. So we adjusted the guns onto specific targets on 2 Sisters. And at the end of it, the CO came up on the radio and said, "Do you realise that's the first fire mission regiment in anger for Britain since the Korean War?" Which we were like, "That really? Oh, okay then, fantastic, good effort, lads." So the next day we were due, or that evening, due to head over to the start line to take out Two Sisters. So you had Two Sisters, Mount Longdon, which was going to be 3 paras objective, and you had Mount Harriet to our right, that was going to be taken out by 4-2 Commando, and 4-5 were taking on Two Sisters. So because my ankle had gone completely gammy and was a bit of a mess, I went down just to get it strapped up, you know what I mean, and just, you know, a bit of a fresh dressing on there. And again, an overzealous medical officer told me to go back and pick my equipment up, and he was going to fly me off to a hospital ship called the Uganda. Now, call me old-fashioned, but if you've just walked all the way over the Falklands, which is no mean feat, to be quite frank, you know, it's quite boggy, quite hilly. You know, someone saying that you can't go on, you're like that, yeah, really. So I totally ignored him, and a few hours later, he headed up to where we were getting ready to do the attacks, and he came up to give me an almighty bollocking, and literally ordered me to follow him. Thankfully, there was an officer stood behind me who outranked him, and I told him a story, and he said, "Yeah, fair point." And bearing in mind that if I'd have left, it would have, you know, 3 people to do a 4-man job, basically. So, you know, for me, it wasn't going to be doing that. So I said, "Listen, yeah, sorry, but I'm not coming. I'm staying put." And we just cracked on, if that makes sense. But it was a really bizarre thing, because the Argentinians, bear in mind, it was flipping freezing cold. So when we got to the start point, or not the start point, but the start line, we had to wait for one of the other companies to get in position. So we were there about 4 hours in conditions. And the Argentinians were throwing mortars up, so they were, you know, just sporadic, really. They didn't know anyone was there because it was a silent attack. So they were throwing the mortars up, and you know, and now and then you'd hear someone sort of, you know, had obviously been hit, shrapnel. But it was just a case of, you know, if your name's on it, your name's on it. You know, you just suck it up. And so you literally just try, even though you're getting mortared, you just try and get your head down, try and, you know, get some, because you didn't know how long this battle was going to take, if that makes sense. So the sensible is typical military mentality: sleep while you can.
Yeah.
So we did that, and then we obviously got the push forward then to start the advance. Now, unfortunately, Mount Longdon, which was 3 para, there someone had set off a trip flare on their advance, and all hell broke loose. And when you looked across, it was you know, it was like Christmas, you know, all this tracer going up and everything else. And I tell you what, it just had that effect on you that any minute now this is going to kick off, and it did, unfortunately. You know, it sparked off, and it was just literally a 14-hour battle. You know, taking, because Two Sisters, it's 2 major peaks, and you had the flat ground in there, and the Argentinians were well dug in, if that makes sense. So we were fortunate. Our artillery was very accurate, and that's really down to the battery. We were using a different battery, so same battery, my battery, because of the elevation of the high ground. Our own battery was supporting 4-2 Commando, so we used 8 battery, so a battery that was basically based in Plymouth. But I tell you what, their gunnery was just absolutely second to none. All our missions were practically danger close, so 50 meters in front of you. And because you've already adjusted the guns, it was actually quite accurate. And then if you then had to move the impact area, you just did a bold correction. just told the Marines, listen, guys, rounds are coming in. Just keep your head down and bring it in. And but unfortunately, with 4 or 5, they'd lost all their mortars, so they didn't have any mortars. So they were very reliant, really, on the artillery. But we only had so much ammunition.
Yeah.
You know, we're on an island. You know, the logistics side of it was not great, and you had to be careful because this was only the first part of our strategy of getting to Stanley. Our next objective was a place called Sapper Hill, and it was very open ground. And to be quite frank, you would have needed a lot of artillery support to be able to get across there safely. So we were having to curb the enthusiasm of the Marines because they were using artillery a bit like they would use mortars. And bear in mind that the mortars are more of a specific, you know.
What size mortars were you guys using, and what was your artillery battery firing? What kind of guns were they using?
So the battery is 105 light gun.
Okay.
And the mortars were 82 millimeter, I think. I think it was 82. So a bit of a difference. So theirs was more accurate. The mortars are obviously a lot more accurate. Whereas artillery is more of an area weapon.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the accuracy of the artillery, specifically because of the gun end, their gunnery skills were just second to none, really. They were using, the Marines were just thinking, you know, mortars, artillery, same thing. So we're having to curb them and say, listen, guys, you know, if you want to take out a machine gun post, take it out with your machine guns and your 66s and your 84 millimeter anti-tank weapons and stuff like that. You know, just get on with it rather than wasting ammunition. So we sort of took the hill eventually, and it all sort of. The Argentinians then sort of started retreating, if that makes sense. And bizarrely, we followed them with the artillery. So as they were walking down, would just send down artillery rounds on top of them. And bizarrely, they would disperse. And then about sort of 10 minutes later, when it had all gone quiet, they would come out and then have a look and then obviously pick up their wounded head. And to be honest, you know, repeat. And then you send another load of artillery round. But it was a bit of a bizarre thing watching the Argentinians doing the same thing. And you know, getting the same result, basically. You know, they were getting stomped all the way back. And someone actually said to me years later, do you feel bad about, you know, shooting at people that are surrendering? And I said, listen, they hadn't surrendered. You know, so these people are retreating. So in our minds, they're now going to go to Sapper Hill, regroup at Sapper Hill, and then we're going to have to attack it again. So, you know, people that are running away or trying to get away from the battlefield are not people that are surrendering. These are people retreating, and as far as I'm concerned, still a threat, if that makes sense. So yeah, for me, it wasn't an issue. You know, I sleep well at night knowing that we did what we needed to do, I suppose. Now, 2 days later, the Argentinians surrendered. So, you know, obviously you're not going to start blowing people up because they've now surrendered. And then literally, and it was really quick. So 5 days after doing the battle, 5, 6, 7 days later, we were actually on the Canberra, you know, heading back to the UK because it was done and dusted. So let's now get all the boys off and away. But my ankle was in crap state, really. So I ended up. So it was a 2 week trip back on the Canberra, which is supposedly a luxury liner. We were lucky enough to be on it when they sent it back. So I literally spent the 2 weeks in the hospital wing. You know, having the odd sort of sneaky beer sort of brought in by one of the lads, like you just full on with antibiotics and stuff like that. Do I regret my decision? Not at all. If that makes sense, I would have felt really, really bad coming off. You know, who goes sick in a war zone? Call me old-fashioned, but You know, nobody,
Yeah.
unless you've got an arm shot off or you've lost your leg, then that's fair. That's a fair point. Yeah, okay, you can go sick. But if you've just got a gammy ankle or I've got a headache and get on with it. And that was the mentality, in the the 70s and 80s. It was just a matter of it is what it is, and we just get on with it.
Well, I
sort of
think
thing. So
I think that kind of carries over too, because like like in Afghanistan and stuff, you didn't want the boys to go out on a mission and you're hanging back because of something. I remember one time when I was in Sengen, my commanding officer, my team leader for my advisor team I was on, had me stay back for one of the like patrols they were doing, because I had gone out I was the only JTAC on my team, and we were split up doing multiple things. So I would go out anytime anybody went out, and I was out for a while the day prior, and he was afraid that I was getting too dehydrated. And I'm like, and he's like, so you're going to stay back today? And I was like livid. I'm like, what do you mean I'm going to stay back? Like, what if something happens? You don't have a JTAC? Like, and it was just, so I think that mentality still exists for a lot of people in combat arms. You don't want the boys to go out and something happen to them and then you not be there. I would have felt so bad had something happened and I wasn't there to lend a hand, be part of the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, on our side of it, a couple of people did go sick, and for me, that's just. And actually, it was the Falklands really that sort of pushed me towards going special forces. Because I when I got back, I just thought, if we had another war, would I like to be with this unit going to another war? And unfortunately, the answer is no. And then once you make that decision, you about it, so
now had you guys gone through like the Commando course and all that? So I've only worked with the 148 battery guys. They've come over and done training with us and stuff over at Anglico, and I know they go through I think it's a Royal Marine led Commando course. Do you guys do the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that, because that's the only way you're going to earn your green beret. So initially you do a beat up first at the Royal Citadel in Plymouth, and that's actually harder than the Commando course. And the reason being is the 2-9 at the time, they didn't want anybody failing the Commando course from fitness. So you got a bit of a beasting from hell, really, and you expected that, so you just got on with it. So by the time you actually got to Limston to do the All Arms Commando course and all the Commando tests that they do, it was actually a bit of a relief, I suppose, because it was harder. The beat up was actually harder than the course itself,
Yeah.
So everyone, and it was good because everyone that wore a green beret in them days had all gone through the same training. If that makes sense, you all have to pass the Commando tests. The Marine test and the All Arms Commanders are exactly the same test. If that makes sense. And everyone's got to do a 30-miler, do a 9-miler, and the steeplechase and all that sort of stuff. And it's good because it gives a bit of a bonding. And bear in mind that we lived in Arbroath, based in Arbroath, and we're actually with the organisation that we went to war with, 4-5 Commando. Close bond knit, that closeness about us, even though we were artillery. So at the end of the conflict, all the Marines were coming up saying, "Fantastic! What great to have the artillery," because before that, when you're doing exercises, it's a bit farcical. Artillery rounds have just gone overhead. Right, okay. When you're actually doing your close and you've got rounds coming on top of you, and you fix bayonets and away you go, that really brings into the context how important it is, especially for the Marines, having artillery support. Because I personally didn't think the Parachute Regiment had the right artillery support. I personally would have liked the paras themselves to have had their own para artillery unit down there to support them, because they went through some hellish battles. You know, the one with 2 para, Goose Green initially, and then Longdon. You know, yes, they had 148 battery doing the naval gunfire support and doing a fantastic job. But I think for the closeness of it, it would have been great if the paras had the same artillery support as what the Marines had. You know, the Marines had a regiment, an artillery regiment, supporting the, you know, 2 or 3 guns went off and supported the initial attack on Goose Green. But they didn't have you know, they didn't have the full support that they really deserved, I suppose.
Yeah.
Whereas the Marines did, yeah, you know, because it was 3 Commando Brigade, and 3 Commando Brigade were there to support the Commando. You know, and bear in mind there was 3 Commando units down there. There was 4, 5, 40 who were held back in reserve. Really, they must have been gutted, but they were held back in reserve, and you had 4 too. So on the battles, you had Sem battery, I think, supporting one commando. You had another one supporting and then you had the other battery supporting, you know, I think maybe 3 para, a bit of 3 para or whatever. But yeah, it's slightly different. So yeah, I think with all the planning when it went on, the para should have brought down with them their because they've got a parachute there. You know, I think it was 7 RHA or 4 Field Regiment maybe, but they're specifically artillery unit, an artillery regiment, a bit like 2 Night Commando, attached to the paras, and they really should have been brought down.
Now, with all of this that you've done up to this point, you know, you've worked with the paras, you've gone through the commando course, you've been in combat. How do you think that prepared you for going through selection? And also, were you concerned that your ongoing ankle issues were going to affect you during selection?
So what happened was I sneaked on a para course. In about 1985, the regiment were away on. I think they're on summer leave or something like that. And I got a phone call from a clerk who was fairly new, and he obviously didn't realise that no parachuting on my docks. So what happened was he rang me up and said, "Oh, Mick, there's a para course on. Do you fancy going on it?" And I went, "Yeah, don't tell anyone." Yeah. So I went down there and I did the para course, which was a month. Came back and had great delight taking my medical docs to the sick bay to say, "Listen, can you get that wiped off?" Because if I hadn't have done that, I couldn't have gone on selection, because you have to in SAS you have to parachute. So that was a bit of a mental block out the way. You know what I mean? If you can parachute with a pin in your ankle, then you can do anything. If that makes sense, there was nothing stopping you. So I then volunteered to do winter, because I'm very good at map reading, and because we used to go to Norway every year. It makes sense that there's 2 SAS courses every year. One in the winter, January, one in the summer. So I volunteered for the winter. So in 1986, I volunteered to do selection. And at the time it was 4 weeks of going up and down hills. And the reason it was 4 weeks at the time, it's now 3 weeks. The reason it was 4 weeks was the very first week was all about teaching people how to map read. And, you know, now call me old-fashioned, if you're volunteering to do Special Forces selection, you should be able to map read. Yeah. So eventually, when I went back a second time, they'd actually got rid of that week. But at the time, it was a 4-week thing. So, and it finishes really with the last 6 days, I think, called test week, where your bogans get much heavier, and the distances obviously get a lot longer. So it's all designed to weigh you down massively. Now on our one, so you started off doing, getting used to the weight, blah 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 blah. And then you start doing proper routes, navigation routes up in the Welsh mountains, and it's all designed really sort of really weigh you down, and your body goes through quite a transition. Blisters, backache, sores, and everything else. And the aim of the game really is to get to the start of test week with no injuries. If you can do that, really, you give yourself a really good chance of getting through. Bear in mind the easy part of selection. So running up and down there, everyone automatically assumes that that's the difficult part. It's not. It's actually the easier part, if that makes sense. But it's psychologically it's quite tough going, and bear in mind a lot of wear and tear. So got to test week, and because of the weather, it was the worst weather on record. So they decided that they were going to postpone test week, and it's the first time it's ever been done, because basically the snow was up to your crutch and you could hardly move. So they said, listen, what we'll do is we'll postpone test week. We'll do a load of weapons and stuff like that, indoor, all that sort of rubbish, and then we'll redo test week the week after. Well, unfortunately, the weather didn't improve at all, and so the first route I was sort of about the fourth person off a truck, and away you went. And the way it's designed is you get called off a vehicle, and there's about 6 vehicles that scatter all over. So you're all going different routes. So the guy that jumps off before you is actually going a totally different route to the way you're going. And it just stops that trying to follow someone rather than map reading.
Yeah.
So, so we set off, and the first one, which was in the Black Mountains, finished that. It was hard going, flipping going in, snow and everything else. Second one was a place called Elan Valley, and Elan Valley is a real boggy area. So not only have you got the bog to deal with, you've now got snow up to your crutch, weight, weapon, everything else. So quite tough going. And unfortunately, my name was called out first off the truck. Right, Hawks, off you get. This is your grid reference, and that's it. Off you go, So now all I remember is I got to about the 5th checkpoint, and the training major and sergeant major were at the checkpoint, and they came over, and just as I was getting a drink of water and getting ready to and they said, listen, Hawksy, just step to one side, go over there to the vehicle and get yourself a coffee or a cup of tea. British Army, cup of tea. And anyway, so I totally ignored that advice. Because you are, keen as mustard and you just want to get on with it, I ignored the advice. Didn't realise it was advice at the time. I just thought, I thought it was a test. Are they going to test me? Am I going to go for that tea? But as soon as I pour the tea, they're going to fail me.
Yeah, seeking out comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. So is all I can remember now is going up to the final checkpoint, which is on high ground, and then the end point was all downhill. Fantastic. But all I remember is waking up in a helicopter. Really bizarre. Waking up in a helicopter, and then I got taken back to Stirling Lines, put in the sick bay for the night. And the training major came in and said, listen, unfortunately you failed. Now I thought, because you're allowed one gypsy's warning, you're allowed to be slightly over time on one of the routes, and what they do is they call your name out, and that's called a gypsy's warning. And once you've got a gypsy's warning, you're not allowed to be over time any other route, if that makes sense. So I naturally assume that that's my gypsy's warning. I can carry on. But again, a medical doctor advised the training major, saying, listen, no, Hawks, no, he's got to come off. And I tell you what, it's the worst feeling in the world. To fail SAS selection is just gut-wrenching. And I was just distraught because I was taking off. So the next day, all the lads, they're off doing another route, and you just hand your kit in, and you're off back to the train station, and away you go. Like, it's just. But they wrote a really nice report saying, get Hawks back on the summer course, get them straight back for the next one. But I was just about to say, unfortunately, but I then met a lovely lady up in Scotland called Kim, who ended up being my wife for 30 years, and we had 4 fantastic kids. So all of a sudden, my urge to go back on selection slightly changed, because selection's always going to be there. Meeting the right woman, on off, and I thought, and I did explain to listen, that's where I want to go, but let's try and build a relationship, I suppose, and it went great. So I put off going back on selection for 2 years, and I ended up getting posted down to Plymouth as an instructor on the All Arms Commando course, and I loved it because it was a great way, really, of passing on experience to some of the younger people, like, and getting them through, making sure that they're ready so that when they went to Lympstone, a bit like when I sort of got the beat up, they were in the right frame of mind, and they had a really good opportunity of getting through the commando course. But in the meantime, Kim was pregnant with my oldest lad, and literally he was 4 days old when the selection that I wanted to go on came up. It was just bad timing, really. So I went on selection, and fortunately I passed. But the next time I saw my son, he was 6 months old, like, so, and it's one of them things, really, where when you're going on something like SAS selection, and you probably understand it as well, you have to be totally dedicated to doing what you've got to do, and actually, forgetting about your wife, forgetting about your young son, just push that to the back of your mind and get on. Because when you're in the jungle, bear in mind that the jungle is by far the hardest part of selection. That running up and down hills, pretty basic. I'll tell you what's brutal. So during in the first week of, now that it's gone back to a 3-week course, 3-week first bit, within the first week, you do a thing called a fan dance. I don't know if you've heard of it, but they do a thing called the fan dance. So it's a run up the penny fan, run down the other end of it, turn round straight away, and then run back over, and then finish at the end. Now, a bit like all the other routes, you never ever, you don't know what the time is. You don't know how quick you have to do it. So basically, you've got to go balls out, really, to make sure that you get through. And a lot of people make the mistake of trying to keep up with the instructor, and eventually they end up just blowing out, basically, and failing. So you could have one off day, and if the off day is the fan dance, that's you finished, because it's quite a brutal way of how they deal with it. So what happens is you all finish. Hopefully. Some people actually wrap the hand in or just give up on it. But generally, everyone then goes back, and you end up in the scoff house having food, but you don't know if you've actually passed or not. You completed it, but in your mind you don't know. And what they do is all the instructors get together and they say, right, what do we think is an acceptable time for the students to do the penny fan, the fan dance? Look at the sky. Actually, the weather was quite good today. The ground's a bit like horse racing. Yeah. The ground was quite decent. So, and they say, okay, let's say 3 hours and 45 minutes. Everyone agreed? Yeah, 3 hours and 45 minutes. They just stick a red line. 3 hours. If you're on the red line and below it, you've gone. No second chance at all. It's not you've either passed it or you failed it. And it's quite brutal because you'll lose about 70 people on one fell swoop. and then you dread in the next morning, and they start calling out the names. And if they call your name out and you're going that way, you passed. If you're going that way, you've all failed. And literally, that's a lot. So about 200 people, between about 170 and 200 people do an SAS selection course. In one day, you literally got rid of 70 people. And the reason they do it, there is method to the madness, I suppose. It's to see if people have actually put the work in to come on selection in the first place. Because remember I said that when it was 4 weeks, it allowed people to do a bit of, get their fitness level up, having that first week. Because they've now got rid of that, you are now, day one, you're good to go. So in that first week, you do that fan dance, and it really shows who's actually put the miles in beforehand, and been up on the hills and done a lot of recce's, time spent on recce, seldom wasted, as they say, but it is quite a brutal but a fair way really of judging how to do it, and away you go. So you get that side of it. So literally the very last march is a thing called the Endurance, which is about 48 mile, with 70 pound on your back, up and down, all over. And at the end of it, you're absolutely off your, it's just absolutely tiring. You're totally wasted at the end of it.
Yeah.
On average, 30 people left. 30 people have passed. So at that initial 200, you're now down to 30. And 30 people is quite a manageable number. It's not a numbers game at all, but on average, it's about 30. Sometimes you get less than that. Sometimes maybe a little bit more. But on average, it's about 30 people. And 30 people going into the jungle is workable. So you then spend a week or 2 weeks doing weapon training and going through ambushes in Wales, then getting prepared really to then go off to do Brunei, the jungle phase, and by far the hardest part of selection, because physically it's demanding, mentally it's draining, absolutely draining, because you're automatically assuming that somebody's watching you, even though you can't see nothing in front of your face. It's just really thick jungle. Primary jungle, you can't see anything. And this, I alluded to the fact that, you've got to forget everything about your family life and that lot. There was a young lad trying to engage in conversation. He went, "Oh, Mick, I understand you've got a young baby at home." And before he said anything else, I said, "Listen, stop what you're saying now." And I just shoved him away. I said, "Listen, not interested," and walked off and got on with it. The next day, he canned it, and I think it was a sort of call for help, I suppose. But he had I found out that he's got a young child as well, and he just wanted to talk about family crap. And to be honest, you're talking to the wrong person. It's not for me. Yeah,
but you got to stay focused on the task at hand. That's all you got to put all of it into it, because if it's like that in combat, right? In a combat zone, if you're not completely focused on the job and your mind is elsewhere, then there's a good chance that you're going to fuck something up. You're going to, something's going to slip. And when you're in that situation, it's unacceptable, because it's literally life and death, and so you have to learn to push that to the side.
You know as well as I do, in jungle warfare, when you're doing ranges in the jungle and it's really close, and you're doing 2-man, 4-man drills, really close arcs and stuff like that, then there is no time to be thinking of anything other than the job in hand. And unfortunately for us, we had a fatality.
Wow.
So we had a young sergeant from the Army Air Corps had volunteered to be the enemy, and unfortunately one of the guys had put a live round in his magazine. Ultimately there was a live round in his magazine. Damn. And he, and bear in mind, he's got a blank firing attachment on the end, so when he fired the round, and we heard it, you know, when you hear a live round, when there's blanks being fired and you hear a live round, it's obvious.
Yeah.
And the round actually hit the BFA, the back of the BFA. But a slither of the round actually peeled off and hit this guy straight through the heart.
Damn.
And he was stood about 5 feet away from the guy that shot him. He was dead before he dropped, you know, so he dropped to the floor dead. All we heard really, because we did the camp attack in the morning, so we were back at the camp really, cleaning weapons and, you know, doing admin. And we just heard the, you know, medic, and we thought, flipping hell, something I missed there. And next thing, you know, you're carrying off a body off a jungle, like, you know. But you know, it doesn't stop the training. It's you know, it happens. So the body then got helicoptered out. Unfortunately, the police, so the SIB, the military police, came into the jungle that afternoon. They got a call. They came in with their suits on. If you can imagine how dirty the jungle is. They came in with their suits on, which is quite comical, I suppose. They interviewed everybody, but because nobody actually knew who actually fired the weapon, or, you know, a bit of confusement. So they actually took all the weapons away, because all the weapons had to be examined. So to continue the exercise, they all had to go up with their golok, their machete, chop down a stick that resembled the size of a weapon, and that was it. And literally, it was straight back into it, guys. You know, forget about that now. Unfortunately, we've had a fatality, but you're here to do a job. Get on with it. The new weapons for them turned up the next day, so the new M16s came in. They then got them issued, and away you went, like, you know. So yeah, it was a bit of a wake up call. When you're getting a fatality on training, but that really just summed up the SAS, like, you know, you train to the absolute maximum, like, you know, and to realism. But unfortunately, you do get accidents, and that followed me really for the rest of my tour. You know, we had quite a few incidents where and it's just, you know, it's just the way it is when you're volunteering for special forces. Then you expect.
I mean, anything, like, you tell people, I've told people this a lot. I'm like, you know, when you do these jobs that are inherently dangerous, you know, even being a forward observer is inherently dangerous. You're lobbing 100-pound explosives downrange. If that messes up, then, you know, that's not good. My very first field op with artillery, they shot the check round, which is the round that's supposed to verify everything is safe. That round landed 50 meters from us because the gunner only put in half the powder he was supposed to, and the chief didn't verify it. And that was just like an introduction to the inherent dangers of being in a job like that. And I think we put in as many safety backstops as necessary, and when you do that, when you're in the job, you start to kind of, I don't want to say, you get kind of complacent. Like, it doesn't seem as dangerous as it really is because there's so many safeties. How could something go wrong? You know, I'm not worried about it. But then every once in a while, something happens that reminds you, like, oh man, at any time, this could be, I mean, think about fast roping out of a helicopter or rappelling out of a helicopter or something like that. It seems pretty safe because you've done the tower and now you're doing the helo with no gear. Now you do it with gear and everyone's doing it and there's no issues. But as soon as someone actually falls off the helo and breaks their back or something like that, then that clicks in your head again, like, oh shit, this is dangerous. You know, like, because you forget about it again because you've trained and the safeties are in place and all these things. Yeah, I mean, that sucks, man. That actually, I think that happened to a special forces team here in the U.S. not too long ago, a few months ago. I think that same kind of scenario happened where there was a live round in their weapons when they were supposed to be doing training rounds.
Yeah. It happens, you know, and you know, I think what happened was all the magazines were centrally stashed.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, this guy picked up the picked up the magazine, and there was a live round in it, like, you know, which is why they didn't actually all know who actually fired the weapon, and it's quite a bizarre story. So the exercise continued, and then you did the final exercise. Final exercise was bizarre. I don't know if you've ever been in the jungle where you're not allowed to use hammocks.
No, I've never really done any jungle training.
Yeah, so you're sleeping on the floor in the jungle, which is a surreal.
Everything crawling all over you all night.
uh, on the bright side, you're so bollocksed and tired. You can have a tiger sort of crawl all over you, or sleep next to you. You wouldn't even notice, like, you know. It's just and bear in mind that, you know, a lot of the time out there it's dark, so you're getting quite a lot, because you don't have to put stags out. You know, you don't have to have watches, because it's that pitch black you can hear people. Mm-hmm. So basically, when it's dark, you know, everybody gets your head down. But when you're fairly close to the enemy, which the final action was, we weren't allowed to. We weren't allowed to brew up. You're not allowed to cook food. Not allowed to put, you know, your bashers up or whatever, because you're within sort of 200 meters of the enemy line. So it was hard routine, as they call it, all the way through. But you're shattered, you know, the way you do it. But anyway, so we, at the end of the exercise, we all flew back using Hueys. The local military unit had the Hueys, and we flew into the camp, and the SIB were waiting. And then when this lad got off the helicopter, they actually went up and said, "Listen, it was your weapon, like, you know." So he, you know, obviously devastated.
Yeah.
But he'd actually passed the jungle. So we had 30 people go into the jungle. When, you know, I said that lad, he decided to can it when he started talking about his kid.
Mm-hmm.
In the jungle, you can either get everybody finishes the jungle and nobody cans it, or if one person cans it, it has a domino effect. And again, we lost about 12 people. 12 people decided to can it and came out.
Wow.
And what they do is they get rid of them straight away. As soon as you come out the jungle, you then go back, get yourself cleaned up, and they get you flown out, so that when the other lads come out at the end, everybody's gone, if that makes sense, because they don't want that any negativity going around. So we were about 18 people, I suppose 20 people. And still you don't know if you passed or failed. You know, you have a rough idea that you've done okay, but you've not been officially told. And we had about a 4-day wait before we actually flew back to Hereford. And literally, as soon as we got back to Hereford, there was you got your head down that night. Woke up in the morning, and there was 2 lists, and it was the lads that had passed on one list. And then the people that had failed on the other list, like, you know, and away they go. You know, there's no time to say, you know, ta-ra, well done, blah blah blah. They're literally gone. You're heading that way, they're going that way, like, you know. So it is quite cutthroat. So we were now down to 18, and you then straight on to combat survival. So learning how to live off the land, and then literally going on the run. For about 5 days, being chased down by the parachute regiment, who take great delight in capturing, you know, potential SAS guy, like, you know. Mm-hmm. So yes, literally go on the run for 5 days, really, and then eventually, you know, some people get captured on the way, get a bit of a kicking. Paris took great delight in that one, yeah, good old kicking.
Yeah.
But then you get filtered, because, you know, if you manage not to get captured, and we were quite lucky we didn't get captured, get filtered really into a trap, because everybody's got to get captured at the end. So we got jumped, about 20 paras jumped, and there was 3 of us in a group. They jumped us, and, you know, give us a bit of a kick in, but nothing too drama, nothing too bad. And then you go straight into the bag, really, and it's 36 hours of interrogation. So you're going through 10 different interrogators, all different, you know what it is. You know, different types of interrogator.
Yeah.
Female, you know, stripping off, female taking the mickey. People, the bully boy, the loud, you know, all that. You know, it's really just to see how you really react to the different things. And quite bizarrely, we lost 4 people.
Wow.
And bear in mind that's near the end of selection. So a really good lad. He's a parachute regiment guy. He got by the Paris. And for some reason, he psychologically he just thought because he'd been captured, he was going to fail. So he said, "Listen, I'm not going to go through all that hassle just to fail." And they tried to persuade him. They said, "Listen, you know, everybody gets captured. Don't worry about it. Like, you know, it's not a big drama."
That's part of the training. You don't get that part of the training unless you get captured. So you have to get captured at some point.
Absolutely, yeah. So he canned it, and that was a bit of a shock, really, because he was definitely on to pass. And then we had a guy that didn't like the stress positions. You know, bear in mind who does.
Yeah.
But you just get on with it. They put you in a stress position and just flipping get on with it. He didn't like it, so he put his hand up and off he went. And when you're in a stress position and somebody's failed, you're like, flip it off.
See, I think out of all of that, the jungle training sounds the worst to me. As someone that doesn't like, you know, sleeping with spiders crawling over you or freaking whatever's in the jungle, you know, all the creatures that live at night. Like, I feel like if I make it through that, then everything else is like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, bizarre. Billy Binningham, actually, a good friend of mine, he alluded to the fact that everything in the jungle wants to kill you. Either wants to kill you or wants. And he's right. You know, but the good thing about Brunei, it's a very clean jungle, so you can literally cut yourself in Brunei, stick a plaster on it, and you're not going to get it. You do that in South America, where the jungle, especially in Central America, where the jungle is really dirty. You cut yourself in, in Belize, for instance, you'll be helicoptered out straight away, like, you know. So that's the good side of Brunei. It's actually a clean jungle, and away you go. Then we got a guy who hyperventilated in his mask, so he was bagged up against a wall. Started panicking, so they took him off. So off he went. Now, bizarrely, at the end of it, the chief instructor stands in front of you. They take your mask off, your hood, and he stood in front of you and he says, "Right, do you recognise me?" And obviously, yeah, because you're so psyched out that you think everything is a trap. Yeah. And he's there with a white band on, saying, "Listen, it's finished. Go and get yourself a cup of coffee," and still you're thinking, really? But I don't know why, but they actually thought I had diarrhea. So every time I went into an interrogation, there was a bottle of water, and they would look at the water and say, "Right, drink it." And as you do, you drink the water, like, you know. And I just thought, oh, that's nice. Thank you very much. Didn't say thank you, but I thought, that's nice of you.
Yeah.
And then you went through all the interrogation and stuff like that. But I just assumed that everybody was going to get a drink of water. And at the end of it, so when I came out, they said, "Right, Oxy, how's your diarrhea?" And I went, "I didn't have diarrhea." Some poor lad had gone through all that, dehydrated.
Oh, man.
But you're not going to turn it down here. You're not going to say, "Oh, that's not for me." You know. But I literally thought I'd failed because I was in a stress position against the wall, and somebody had come up on the side of me and put some bread, a little bit of bread in my hand, and said, "Right, eat that quickly." And as you do, dropped it. I then made the mistake of going, "Cheers, mate." And so that was playing on my mind. I thought, fuck, I failed, you know. So when we came out, psychologically, I thought, I failed this. So I got to another lad who got released about the same time, and he said, "How'd you get on?" I thought, well, to be honest, mate, I think I've actually failed this. He said, "Well, why?" I said, "Well, I said, 'Cheers, mate.'" he went, oh, he says, I think I've actually failed. When they asked him a question, he made the mistake of nodding. You know, and you know, because obviously they can video you, put in a load of words. Did you slaughter all them people? Yeah, yeah. So he thought he'd failed. So two of us were talking, thinking, flipping hell, failed. And this guy, this guy came up, the fourth person to fail, came up alongside of us and said, "Oh, is that what you said?" And we were like that. Yeah, why? He actually got into conversations with the interrogators. Bearing in mind, it was in the old days where the big four and nothing else. You know, it wasn't the days of giving a cover story. When you're in Ireland, you give a cover story. When you're on SERE selection, it's name, rank, number, and date of birth, and that is it. Nothing else, like, you know. So when this guy came up and said, "Oh, actually, you know," me and this guy looked at each other, went, "I think we passed."
Yeah.
And as it happened, so them four lads went, and we were now down to 12 people, and it was thankfully we. So at the end of combat survival, you then do anti-terrorist type training, and it's really just to make sure that you're happy with shooting with respirators on, and you're able to adapt to a new weapon system and everything else. And it's literally only about 2 weeks. You know, getting into it, and then at the end of it, no ceremony. You know, you're all in the cinema, I suppose, and there's training major comes in, the CO comes in, the RSM comes in. They've got a load of berries there, obviously with your name in it, and all they do is they toss you your berry, and that's what it was all about, really. It's earning the berry and a staple belt. And there's no ceremony, no fancy, you know. Actually, from there, you went straight down to whatever squadron you wanted to go to. So I wanted to go to B Squadron, and I wanted to go to Mountain Troop or 9 Troop. They were my two options, and thankfully I got the options I wanted. Not many people like going to Mountain Troop. They tend to go to Air Troop. Or mobility, or boat troop. Only the strange people, I suppose, go to mountain troop. You know, because really, you know, because when you think about it, mountain training, we can go to Wales to do our mountain training. Air troop go to America. They go to San Diego to do parachuting, or Australia, anywhere nice and hot. So same as the boat troop lads, you know, they go to hot climates. And the mobility boys, you know, they got the desert to, you know, mountain troop. Right, you can go to Wales for 2 weeks, or Scotland.
Yeah.
And off you go, or do a bit of skiing over skiing in Germany or France or whatever, like, you know. So it was great. You know, it was 12 of us sort of passed, and we still do. You know, we had a 30th anniversary reunion when we all got together a few years ago. Took a bottle of brandy up there just to toast, because unfortunately we lost 3 people. We've lost 3 people from the selection process. So we took a bottle of brandy up there and just toasted, you know, the people that have gone. Earlier this year, sorry, we had another reunion, and again another person has since died. So yeah, the numbers are slowly sort of filtering down, if I may. It's just, you know, that age really, where, you know, I'm 65, and it's just an age where people start dropping, like, you know.
Things start happening. Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's weird as you start to get older, like, you never really think about dying or your friends dying or anything like that. I mean, obviously combat changes that some, but like just dying of like getting hit by a car, or somebody gets cancer, or somebody, those are not really thoughts in your head. But then after you get, like, I'm 40 now, so as you hit that age and kind of get older, those thoughts are in your head more, because people that you've known start dying from these random things, and you're like, holy shit, like, that could happen to me. You know, it's weird how death starts to get on your mind more than it is when you're like 25, you know?
You know, I think the worst thing is suicides. And, you know, you automatically assume SAS, SBS, Tier 1, Delta, SEAL Team 6 have all got a strong mentality, but we've had our fair share of suicides, and you never know what's going on in people's minds, if that makes sense. So outwardly, we've had guys climbing Mount Everest, come back and committed suicide, and some real hardcore individuals that you would never ever think would take their life, and
Yeah.
but they do. So that's probably the most devastating. Second, really, is cancer or some sort of disease where you've got no control. Motorbike accidents is a big one on the list. Because for some reason everyone likes to buy a Harley Davidson. Once they reach that 40 years of age, right, I want my toy. And I'm the same. When I hit 50, my ex-wife and kids brought me a big Ducati, which I kept for about 5 years and then traded it in for a Harley Davidson.
Yeah.
An old man's bike, as we say. We've had our fair share of people, losing people and that lot. It's never nice to hear, when it comes up in the conversation, did you hear about blah blah. So, especially all the stuff we do. So, I've got metal in the back of my head, so I'm absolutely stone deaf in one ear. And it all came because I got too close to a door charge, but it wasn't one of our door charges. It was the Swedish military. They were putting a door charge, retreating about, and we were looking at it, going, "Hold on, stop, come here." Sort of dragged him around and said, "Listen, we'll show you how to do it properly, or how we do it." And I put the door charge on, and I looked, when the deck cord looks a bit too thick. We use 10mm deck cord and plastic debts for a reason, and it's enough to send the door in, unbeknown to me, the Swedes were using 30mm deck cord and a metal deck. So I put the door charge on, and normally you would go behind the guy that's actually going to blast the door with a clacker. There was no room, so we had the three guys. So the guy in front, two guys directly behind, and there was no other room. So I sort of managed to get in front of, so the door charge was literally there. And when I looked at it, I just thought, what I should have done was looked over at the Swedes, because they were then still walking.
Yeah.
Watching, but they actually were walking under, and we should have clicked on, but respirator on, headphones on, blasted the door, and I knew it was going to be painful, but we blasted the door, and my respirator and my headphones ended up about 100 meters behind me. In fact, the Swedes caught it.
Oh wow.
And I staggered, muscle memory, so you stagger in there sort of doing your drills or whatever. But I looked down and I had blood pissing out of my, my coveralls. There was blood pissing out of it, So they stopped, they stemmed the bleeding, took me to hospital, and because they then told us that they were using a metal det, we put two and two together and went, yeah, a bit of the det's gone through my arm basically. So the doctors X-rayed it at the Stockholm hospital. X-rayed it and said, "Listen, you've got a tiny slither of a dent in your arm. It would cause more damage trying to get it out. So we're going to leave it in situ and just get on with it, basically." And I thought nothing else of it. So fast forward, this is 1995, 4 years, 3.5 years. I was running the ranges at a place called Pontralis. So in charge of all the CQB.
Mm-hmm.
On the phone call, I was ordering ammunition, blah, 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 yeah. And then the phone went dead. And first of all, I thought, cheeky twat, putting the phone, sort of, wanker. Put the phone on the other end, it was booming. And I was like that. What the fuck? Nothing. Holy hell, living. Anyway, so, ordered the ammunition. Because we were running an exercise, pistol shooting and blah. So 2 days later, when it all finished, I went down to the med centre, and they said, I said, "Listen, I'm stone deaf in one ear. I can't hear anything. What's?" No, I didn't know. It was a bit surreal. And they said, listen, it's probably wax in your ear. And I went, I don't think so. So they checked me in. They went, yeah, no, yeah, you're right. It's not wax. And they went, Mick, you've done a lot of undercover work in places like Northern Ireland. It's probably the result of that. And I went, I actually used to put that in my left ear. And they went, okay. So they then decided to send me down to London to do an MRI scan. And got sent down there. And just before you go through, the doctor came out and went, I've got your records here. It says you've got a pin in your ankle and you've got a bit of metal in your arm. And so just, tell me where it is. And I said, yeah, there. And they went, right, okay. Came out and they went, that bit of metal that was in your arm has actually lodged in the back of your brain. And it was literally instantaneous. It severed the hearing on the right hand side.
Wow.
So it was a bit surreal. They assured me, but they did that before, that because it's lodged in the back of the brain and severed that it's not going to move anywhere else. It's going to be there and stay there. But I just thought, at the end of 22 years and doing the stuff that we've done, having a crushed finger, trigger finger of all things, crushed my finger in Norway, stone deaf in one ear, bit of a switch, pin in my ankle. Actually, that's not a bad return, because when you see these young lads coming back from Afghanistan, mate, and you know it yourself, and they're missing legs and they've lost arms, or they've lost an eye or something, when they claim for compensation, they deserve it. Whereas, I've still got my faculties, I've still got my sense of humour, still got my, striking good looks. Yeah. I'm still normal as can be, if that makes sense. Okay, if you stood on this side of me and you're talking, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. All I'll see is your lips sort of flapping, which is why my daughter always walks on my left-hand side, because she got caught out and she was rabbiting away for about half an hour. And at the end of it, I went, what? All right. Yeah. So
that's crazy that it worked its way from your arm to the back of your head like that.
Yeah.
I've heard of that before, though, like stuff moving through the body like that. But that's pretty wild.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. I class myself as being quite lucky, really, because my big concern initially when it first happened, they said, listen, we're going to leave it, was, hold on, is that going to go through my heart? And they went, yeah, it will eventually. It'll go through the heart, but it's so small. It's not. Listen, no need to worry about it. Okay.
Thanks, Doc.
You're the. Yeah. So that was the Swedish doctors, and then it was confirmed by the doctors in Hereford. Like, listen, it's going to cause, and it'll cause even more dramas now. Trying to take it out from the back of my head, like, So yeah. So when I have when you do the hearing check, waste of time, and I can't even wear an earpiece because you need something. It's like sticking out on the side of your ear, like, there's nothing there. There's nothing to amplify stone deaf, like, So
that's crazy.
That's part. I part and parcel of the job, like, if that makes sense. So,
no, you're right. I mean, it definitely could be worse. I mean, but it could also be better. So
yeah, absolutely.
At least you have a good attitude about it.
Yeah, I mean, you can make a big drama out of it, I suppose. So as when me and Billy got captured in Bosnia, you could make a big drama out of it, but it's not a big drama. It's one of them things that happens, and you just get on with it. I think because we're old school mentality, I suppose. Let's not make a drama out of it. Things happen in life, and I think having 3 military sons as well really does focus your mind. Because someone always said to me, do you suffer from post-traumatic stress, or any do you get flashbacks and like that? No, because we used to come back off. If we were doing something over in Northern Ireland, for instance. I would come back and my Kim, my wife at the time, she would say, right, Mick, welcome back. You know, you'd literally walk in, put your burger on the floor. Can you go and pick the 3 boys up? You know, because Kitty wasn't born then. Can you go and pick the boys up? And, you know, you're down. So you're down there. So that night you've been doing something. And then that evening, or that, you know, the following day, you're picking the boys up from school. And it was a fantastic leveler. And when I give presentation and talks about, you know, motivation and stuff like that, and I've got a big picture, a family picture at the very end. And I said, you know, having a strong family behind you in the military is a good thing, because the lads who are not married or live in the block or whatever, you know, they've got time to dwell on it. You know, they can start thinking of, when you've got 3 kids jumping all over your head, you know, watching cartoons, you haven't got time to start feeling sorry for yourself or wondering, you know, did I do, you know, you've got these little monsters to flipping deal with, like, you know. And it's a great leveler. It's a fantastic leveler. So, you know, I sleep easy at night. I really do, like, you know, and I have no facts, no nothing. You know, it's just, you know, it was a job.
Some people,
it was a job to do.
Some people would say that having that like real kind of switch, like going from like Afghanistan and coming home, and within a couple days you're home and you're supposed to, that messes with people, you know, that they need time to ease out of it. So it's interesting that you say that that was better for you to go right into back into family life, because I know, I mean, in the military, they try to do some like post-deployment training to be like, hey, you know, when you come home, you can't carry that baggage back with you. Your family's on a schedule that you're not part of. You haven't been part of for months. You gotta get used to their schedule. You know, it's like there's like this post-deployment training and stuff. And I think a lot of people say that the PTSD levels are worse now than they were like post-World War II, because those guys had time to decompress and talk about what happened and all that stuff before they got home. So it's interesting that you kind of think the opposite worked better for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in our day, there was no such thing as decompression. You know, you just came straight back from Bosnia. You know, I literally came back from Bosnia, threw my kit in the corner, was on a train, driving down and then doing a 2-year deployment with MI5 down in London, or coming back from the first Gulf War straight onto the anti-terrorist team, or what, coming back from Northern Ireland straight over to Bosnia. So there was no, there was no time to fanny about and start, you know, overthink. And a lot of it is overthinking things, you know, and stuff like that. You know, keep it simple, stupid. A big question that kept being asked, and it's great we're on an American podcast, really. Someone always said, Mick, you know, who would you say is the best SF unit? And it's between the Brits and the Americans. That's you know, but it's the SAS, and the reason being is the diversity of our work. Now I've worked with Delta. You know, we went over to Bragg, and we ended up going up to Jackson Hole because I wanted to learn a bit about Arctic warfare. Arctic warfare in Jackson Hole. The coldest it got was about -1. So our suggestion was go to Norway.
They should have sent you up to Alaska.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, fantastic blow, and I utmost respect for Delta, because Delta and the SAS are very much aligned.
Well, that's where, for those that don't know, that's Delta came from. I think it was Charlie Beckwith was doing cross training and was serving with SAS as a foreign, you know, cross training or whatever, and then came back and pitched that idea of that kind of force to the U.S. And then he, you know, from there they created Delta Force and used a lot of the same selection techniques and stuff that you guys use.
Yeah, because what I was trying to allude to really was that the fact that SAS guys and Delta are hardcore military people first and foremost. You know, they're Marines, Airborne, Rangers, whatever. You know, they've done their time on the ground, getting to a certain point where they want to do something different. They want to, you know, and I'm not going to say better themselves, because you know, the Rangers, the Marines, and everything else have got hardcore units within that. If that
just
makes
another
sense.
challenge.
So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, which was a great word for it. different challenge. But you've got that background, whereas SEAL Team 6, SEAL teams don't have that. Don't have that sort of hardcore military grounding, if that makes sense. Where if it all falls apart, you've got a lot of experience between the guys who've got different military backgrounds that can pull it all together and get yourself out the crap, if that makes sense. So I put the regiment and Delta, and that includes SBS as well, on a level par. And the reason I say SAS slightly above is the diversity of our work. We do the anti-terrorist team. We can, and I'll give you an example. So anti-terrorist team 1 minute, growing your hair long, undercover work, Northern Ireland, shaving your hair off, going over to Bosnia, growing your hair back long again, working with MI5, coming back from that, teaching. So a massive, diversity of operations, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that solely edges the regiment slightly, not very all professional, but work-wise, I would say the regiment is slightly above. And now I know a lot of Delta people and Americans, brutes and blah, blah, blah. But it's just that diversity of our work that we do.
Well, that's the good, I guess that's the good thing about when you, I don't mind when people compare different services or different specialties, because if someone is pointing out something that you think is deficient within your own unit or your skill set or whatever, that just gives you an opportunity to make it better. You know what I'm saying? Like, you should be critical, and I'm not saying you're being critical to Delta or anything like that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that may be a challenge to a Delta operator that hears this, and he's like, F this guy, man, I want to be better at, this next thing or whatever. It's just that's why units like SAS, Delta, SEAL Team 6, Rangers, all these guys are really hardcore guys, because you're wanting to be better. You're trying to better yourself. You're trying to get slightly faster when you're clearing that room, slightly faster when you're doing that magazine change, slightly faster when you're doing that target location. And those, what seems out to an outsider, what does a half a second matter in doing a reload? Well, in real life, a half a second could be life or death. So maintaining those standards and trying to push yourself to that absolute edge only makes us all better anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. This is no slant on Delta at all. I would willingly, share and everything else with the Delta Force lad. The thing that slightly makes us slightly different is the different work that we do. When we're doing the same job, they're the same, absolutely the same. Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever, Syria, exactly the same. Do the same job, the same way. But the boys will come back and they'll go up and do the anti-terrorist team. I know Delta don't do it because for political reasons or whatever. It's just so that's why I always
missions,
Yeah, and because it's mission specific, if that makes sense. We're our and a lot of it as well. I think for us, we had a big grounding years ago. You had Vietnam, fantastic. So we had young lads getting out straight to Vietnam. You were hardcore straight away because you were leaving the regiment training, and you were operations. Then you lost that. We had Northern Ireland, so we had people, and so that was a good training ground. So Vietnam for you was good training ground, even though it's a war. Northern Ireland for us, good training ground, and it sets you up ready for other organisations. And the British military always used to be very, very good at hearts and minds, always used to be. But first Gulf War finished it all. We we lost the art of winning the hearts and minds, if that makes sense, and which is pretty sad. I'm overly critical really sometimes. Like B Squadron, in the first Gulf War, we shouldn't have been there. Should never have been in theatre. You had G Squadron, who'd spent 6 months doing the build-up training for the Gulf War.
Mm-hmm.
B Squadron, we were on the anti-terrorist team in Hereford, black kit, fannying about. December, swap over. B Squadron went out there trying to find jobs. So we had the disastrous Bravo 20, Bravo 10, Bravo 30.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have been in theatre, to be quite frank, because they should have stayed out there. And what they should have done, someone should have had the balls to say, listen, B Squadron, you're going to do an extra 6 month or an extra, whatever time period on the SP team, because we've got a squadron who's fully up to speed, got the weapons, got the ammunition, got the equipment, G Squadron, good to go, if that makes sense. But they didn't.
No, I know what you're saying, because they understand the battlefield. They understand the area that they're in. You're bringing in a guy, absolutely. You're bringing in a team that is fully qualified, great weapon handling, great tactics and all that. But until you're on the ground in an area, you don't know what the atmospherics are of that area. And once you've been in an area for 6 months or whatever, you've really got to know, you've really gotten to understand how that area kind of operates, what you can do, what you can't do. That's why when we were doing these deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, you got 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines is in an area of operations, and then 1st Battalion, 7th Marines comes in to relieve them. Well, there's always that little crossover period, and then the first month of that 1-7 deployment where they're trying to kind of get their feet on the ground and figure out how that area works. Whereas by the end of the deployment, you know who the major players are. You know like I said, what you can do, what you can't do, what areas you need more support to go into. It's those little things that really matter when you're talking about combat situations. So, this has been.
That's the only black. That's it. My only black mark really against the T2 was that period where I just felt really. It was the wrong. It's not often the regiment gets something wrong. In my opinion, they got that decision wrong. G Squadron should have been up there.
Yeah. Well, Mick, man, this has been a really great conversation. I'll probably I'd like to have you come on again, and we can talk more about your career, because obviously it's extensive. We didn't get into Bosnia or anything like that. I'd like to get more in depth with some of your work in Northern Ireland, if possible, and everything. But so far, this has been really great. I think we're just over. Yeah, we're at just over 2 hours. So I think we're going to call it here. If people, do you want to go ahead and tell the audience where people can find you on social media, or what your website is?
Well, I'll tell you what. If I send it you, you can post it on the thing if you like. Basically, we're a company called Hawks and Co. So www.hawks HAWKES and AND at co.uk.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah, I'll put the link in the description so people can check that out.
Yeah. We're quite a unique sort of family. It's a father and daughter training consultancy team. We're trying to get into rural, because I actually live on the farm here. So we're actually trying to help the farmers, nice. Changing that culture, that security culture, because unfortunately bad people pick up on bad culture.
Yeah.
And the farmers over here in the UK are deemed as very easy targets. So what we're trying to do is change that mindset with the farmers, really.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Everybody can check out my social media. Instagram is Former Action News, Former Action Guys, and then my website is jkramergraphics.com. And that's it, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, and thanks for the time, mate. Much appreciated.